Todd Dunn here on November 4th, 2017. Today, I'm at home in my garage doing a little work on the solar panels from my sailboat. This may not look like much of a solar array, and it isn't. It's two 20-watt solar panels. The reason I don't have much in the way of solar on the sailboat is twofold. First, there's not a lot of space on the sailboat where I can set solar panels up where they'll be unshaded. And second, these are the first solar panels I installed on anything about 7 or 8 years ago. And at the time I did it, I really didn't know much about solar. I didn't want to spend much money, so I bought a single 20-watt solar panel, which cost me about $35 at the time. And the cheapest possible solar controller, this is a simple on-off solar controller. I think I paid $7 for it. So I bought one panel, it worked pretty well, so I bought a second panel to get a little more output. These two panels together will put out about 2.5 amps of charging power in bright sun, which over the course of a few days will keep my batteries charged up very nicely. Because I wanted to mount two panels, what I did was I simply bought a couple of pieces of aluminum flat bar and screwed them to the panels. There are holes in the outer edges here, which I then screwed through to mount the panels onto the boat. So this makes a nice rigid setup, basically turns my two panels into one physically, but not electrically. The repair I'm going to be doing today is a consequence of the wiring here that comes from the solar panels to my wiring. You can see this is a bit of a hodgepodge mess right now because this wiring turned out to be automotive grade, which means it's untinned. And in the marine environment, this wiring has not held up. It's corroded through, and a number of times over the last year, the wiring has simply broken at the connector. It's corroded through and broken and failed. So this has to go. So what I'm going to do today is replace these automotive grade untinned wires with marine grade tinned wires by soldering new wires to the contacts on the solar panels. It's a very simple repair. It should only take about 5 or 6 minutes. And what I'm also going to do, because I'm controlling this with a simple controller, although I'm probably going to upgrade to a PWM controller, two panels like this don't justify the expense of an MPPT controller. So I'm going to upgrade to a PWM controller. So when I do this wiring change, I'm going to permanently hook these two panels together in parallel so that they will continue to put out their 18 volts, but we'll put out 2.5 amps together when they're in full sun. I'm going to do that connection right here from the connection boxes so that I can then attach one wire to one panel and lead that out to the controller. So the first thing to do is to get this mess of old wires off and then get going. So let's get started. I've got my soldering iron set aside warming up, but these are the basic things I'm going to need. I've got a couple of different wire strippers, and this one also doubles as a wire cutter. So the first thing I'm going to do is cut these wires, which, as you can see, that just broke off again because it's corroded through. Cut that, cut that, cut that. So I can get rid of that. Now I'm going to open up these two boxes. To do that, I'm going to wedge a knife in here and just pop them open. Now I can open them up. Here's a close-up view of the connectors. Basically what we have is negative here and positive here. So very simple connection. I'm just going to desolder these wires and take them out on both sides, and then I'm going to run a wire from negative here to negative here and positive here to parallel the two panels. So let's get going. The first step is going to be to take these little plates off. This is stress relief to hold the wires solidly in there, and it'll be a lot easier to work if I don't have that there. So I'm just going to unscrew that, take this little plate off, which appears to be steel, and because they're corroded. Now I have a little bit more room to work on the wires. I'll do that on both sides. There we go. Now, get my soldering iron and desolder those connections. This takes a few seconds here. I warm it up, melt the solder, and I can just pull this wire off. Simple as that. Do the same over here. The only thing I want to do here is to remember that which side is negative and which side is positive so that I don't mess up. There we go. Yep, completely disconnected. I'll set my soldering iron there to get out of the way and pull these little wires out. So this is negative and positive, negative and positive. So I can take those wires out now. And the next step is to put the panels in parallel. So I'm going to cut off a piece of black wire for the negative. About there. And strip the ends. And this is something you're not going to see anymore. Radio Shack solder. Can't buy that anymore. So I will put the screwdriver on here to hold this down. I'll take that, hold it down on there, and make the solder connection. I'm going to use the existing solder that's on there and see if I can make this solder connection. Maybe feed a little new solder in just to get good thermal contact with my soldering iron. That has set, and that's on there. Now we just have to take the other end, take it over here, feed it in there, and for length I'll cut it off about here. And strip it. And we'll just solder this back on. So There we go. So that side is soldered up. I just have to put parallel the other side. Piece of red wire here, which will nip off. One thing now what remains to be done is to connect the wires that are going to go from the solar panels to the charge controller. That's pretty straightforward, and I'm going to get going on it. Before I do that though, I'm going to put the stress relief back on this side. Get these wires in the right place. Because I'll be making my connections on the other side. Here we are, one down. There we go. She's all set. So now I'm going to get my wires over here. Okay, I've got the cable that's going to go to from the panels to the solar controller here. This is Ancor number 14 marine grade wire. All of this wire is Ancor marine grade wire. What makes it marine grade is that it is tinned. It is not bare strands of copper. So what I'm going to do now is simply solder this wire onto my connector here. Hold it down, put the soldering iron on, and add a little solder to get a good contact. And let that warm up and melt on there. And we'll hold that down, take it off. Let it cool, and we have a good connection. Now we can do the same thing over here with the positive wire. Let's get it in there. Hold it temporarily here so that I can get the soldering iron on it with it in the right place. Put a little solder on it. And we'll let that set up. Okay, that's on there. Now my stress relief is not going to fit in there, so I'll have to rig up an additional stress relief here by just tying this wire around the crossbar. So at this point I can put my covers back on, and these two panels are parallel together and connected to the wire which will go into the boat. And get this wire in the right place. There we go. And there we have it. It's completely set. So that repair is done. These two solar panels are now parallel together, and my output wires are connected. So the only thing that remains is to put this back on the boat, lead this wire where I want it to go, and connect it up to the controller. As a final test, I've taken the panels outside and set them in the sun and connected my voltmeter to the wire. And as you can see right here, I'm getting 20.6 volts This voltmeter is not super accurate. Tilt the panels a little more toward the sun. Didn't make a huge difference. Now I'm going to shade the panel a little to show you what happens if you get shade on your panel. See, 20 points, it dropped right off. Now I'll stand in front. I'm shading both panels to some extent, and I'm down to 19 volts. Step out of the way, I'm right back to 20.6. So shade is your enemy when you've got solar panels. Anyway, my little repair seems to have worked. Now I've got all marine grade cable on there, which should hold up a lot better to the environment on my boat. And I've also got all my connections inside the connector boxes on the panels, so they're going to be protected because these panels are mounted horizontally, so those connector boxes are out of the rain and out of the weather, so everything should be good. These, by the way, are monocrystalline solar panels, which have the highest output. As I said, these panels should put out about 2.5 amps when they're parallel together like this. 2.5 amps is way below the carrying capacity of my 14 gauge wire, which is rated probably for 15 amps continuous, and the voltage drop over the approximately 8 feet from the solar panels to the batteries will be minimal. Okay, so that finishes this little project up, and I hope you learned a little bit about just how easy it is to switch over from the cheap automotive wire to much higher quality marine wire on your solar panels, which really is an important thing to do if you bought panels that didn't have tinned marine grade wire on them and you want to use them on your boat.